Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Lana Peterson, and I'm a Professional Development Manager here at the National Youth Leadership Council. Just wanted to welcome everyone onto the webinar. There may be people who are coming in a little bit late, and that is fine. They might have to download some last-minute pieces to their computer, but just want to let everyone know you should be hearing me through either the integrated calling the number that you saw on the TV, or on the computer, or through your speakers or headphones on your computer. If everyone wants to let me know through the chat box that they can hear me, so I know that I am talking to a group, that would be wonderful. I just want to introduce our presenters quickly. Awesome. Sounds like everybody can hear. From the Education Commission of the state, we've been working with ECS for a very long time as one of our dearest service learning partners in the field. ECS is focused on effective policy and practice for public education. And the project we primarily work with underneath ECS is the National Center for Learning and Citizenship, which is focused on civic ed and service learning. And our presenters today will tell you more about what ECS does. I want to introduce Lisa Guilfoyle, the project leader, Molly Ryan, the associate policy analyst, and Emily Workman, also a policy analyst. ECS is always present at our National Service Learning Conference, and this year they presented a similar workshop at the conference, and so we wanted to invite them to share that information with the online network. This is the second webinar that ECS has presented through the Generator School Network, and of course, won't be the last either. And so I introduce these presenters, and please let us know if you have any questions along the way through the chat box. Take it away.
Thank you, Lana. Thank you. I hope everyone can hear us all right. As before, let us know if you're having trouble. My name is Lisa Guilfoyle, and as she mentioned, I'm joined by Molly and Emily today, and we're happy to be able to do this with you, spend some time. So we're going to cover a lot of material, but we're hoping that at the end you'll have some pretty hefty takeaways, and that the Common Core and service learning especially will be a little bit more clear. So I'm just going to go forward. And I'd like to take a minute, if you could, over in the chat area, if you could just introduce yourself to us, and it includes these things: your name, where you are working, and in what role, and perhaps one thing that you hope to learn from today's webinar. If you could do that in the chat side, that would help us to get a good sort of feeling for the audience and what kinds of things that you're hoping to walk away with. We have a curriculum writer. We have a project manager in a school district. Erica, thank you. And we won't read every one out loud. Looks like we have a school counselor, an improvement consultant. We're assuming that we're going to have some administrators, practitioners. We've got Alyssa Hawkins from Earthforce. Hi, Alyssa. And there's Lana, of course, the ever-present Lana Peterson. So you can go ahead and continue if you'd like, but I'm going to share a little bit with you about what it is that ECS is about, the kind of work that we do and so forth. ECS stands for the Education Commission of the States, and we are the only national organization that helps state education leaders and lawmakers make better decisions, and that's a big job. So unlike other organizations that might work with only one constituency, we work with all kinds. We work with people like governors, we work with state legislators, higher ed officials, state superintendents, and other ed leaders on all education issues, from pre-kindergarten up through college. So what we do is we try to give these leaders and decision makers unbiased information about what other states are doing, what research studies say about certain programs and policies, and as well as what the experts say about various issues. And I'm happy to say that ECS has been doing this successfully for about 48 years. So we've been around a long time. And then under the umbrella of ECS, there are several institutes NCLC stands for National Center for Learning and Citizenship, and our focuses are service learning and civic education. So there are other instances within ECS, but those are our hot buttons. Those are the things that we focus on most. And our vision is that all students in this country are prepared for a lifetime of active civic engagement, and our mission is to restore the civic mission of schools, and we do that by supporting state policymakers' efforts to foster civic learning and engagement opportunities for all students. So that gives you a little bit about what we're about. And then, so I want to give you a little bit of an idea of what we're going to be doing today.
Hi everyone, this is Molly. What we hope to accomplish with you today is first to illustrate why service learning in the Common Core is a good and natural fit, to examine how incorporating service learning into Common Core implementation brings out civic competencies in students, and finally to share practical examples of service learning and Common Core integration.
Okay, so what we'd like to do right now is share just a little video with you that might kind of pull it together for you.
Like it or not, life is full of measuring sticks. How smart we are, how fast we are, how well we can, compete. But up until now, it's been pretty hard to tell how well kids are competing in school and how well they're going to do when they get out of school. We like to think that our education system does that. But when it comes to learning what they really need to be successful after graduation, is a girl in your neighborhood being taught as much as her friend over in the next one? Is a graduating senior in, say, St. Louis as prepared to get a job as a graduate in Shanghai? Well, it turns out the answer to both of these questions is no. Because for years, states have been setting different standards for what students should know and be able to do at each grade level. That's making it too hard to know if our kids are really doing well enough overall, and if they can really compete for a job someday. What we really need are clear goals. That's where the Common Core state standards come in. They're like a total sea change in education. Consistent, strong, clear benchmarks for English language, arts, and math. Here's how it works. You can think of kindergarten through 12th grade like a giant staircase. Each step is a skill your child needs to learn before stepping up to the next one. But right now, too many kids aren't really confident with like 2 plus 2 before they have to move on to 2 times 2. We need more focus on the skills that help them move up the stairs, or they can slip up and fall behind. And there's another problem. What if everyone's stairs were made at different heights? Well, here we go again. They are. So, a boy in Seattle who's rocking an A in English literature could be getting a C on his Chicago friend's staircase. Oops. We need to create consistent steps in education, too. So first, each standard creates a landing on the staircase, a stop along the way as your child heads toward high school graduation. Each stop is a chance for every parent and teacher to focus on skills their students are supposed to know at that step, no matter the zip code, language, or race. And more importantly, each standard makes sure all students are learning what they need to know to get to graduation and beyond. Because something like counting to 100 leads to understanding dollars and cents, which eventually leads to understanding how to manage a budget. Secondly, the standards are consistent from school to school, and they match up against international standards too. Now we know how we're doing compared to just about everyone. So even though local communities will still design their own curriculum, with the same rules, everybody can compete on the same kind of staircase. But standards aren't learning. That's why we need teachers, parents, and students to help make that happen. By working together to help kids meet these standards. The world's getting more and more competitive every day. But now, when our kids get to the top of their staircase, they can have way more options of where their life goes from there. Clear goals, confident, well-prepared students. That's the Common Core state standard.
So I hope you enjoyed that little video. That was put together by DC Public Schools. And so what we're going to do right now is we're going to have Emily talk a little bit about what Common Core is doing right here in the United States. Oh, first we want to ask you a question, sorry. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the lowest, how prepared do you personally feel to implement the Common Core in your content area? You could take a second and respond to that. We kind of want to just get a feeling for that, because we're hoping to maybe do some follow-up as well. So we want to be able to know where you are and how you're feeling about Common Core in your particular area. Is zero an option? Yeah, actually, it's not uncommon, frankly. So this is one of the realities that we're finding. So. Right. We've got 6, we've got 2, got a 1, another 6. So this is again not surprising to us, and Molly is going to talk a little bit later about a case study that we've been conducting and some pretty interesting findings that we've gotten from around the country with 4 separate schools. So this is helpful for us. And now I'm going to just let Emily talk to you a little bit about what's happening now in the United States with the Common Core.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. I have to say it kind of breaks my heart to see such low numbers on how comfortable you feel about implementing the Common Core. Having followed it since 2010, we know that getting teachers signed on and other people in schools prepared to actually implement these standards is far more challenging than I think the writers ever expected. And I hope that following this webinar and other resources that we hopefully can provide you with, that you'll soon start to feel a little bit more comfortable with it, because it is right around the corner. So just briefly, I think we all know this, but what is the Common Core? The Common Core state standards provide a consistent, clear understanding of what students are expected to know in order to be considered college and career ready. Just a brief overview of what the Common Core looks like right now across the country. 46 states plus DC have adopted the Common Core. Those that have not, or that are different colors on here, the only 2 things that I'd like to point out is that Minnesota is the only state that adopted only the ELA standards and not the mathematics standards, so they're about halfway there. And Alaska, while they have not adopted the Common Core state standards, they are the only state that have a district within them, which is Anchorage, that has chosen to adopt it independent of the rest of the state. With that, I think that I'm assuming that most of you know which assessment consortia you're a part of, but this is the biggest discussion that's taking place, at least within the media right now, about the Common Core, is that the new assessments are going to be rolled out in 2014-15. There's 2 major Common Core assessments, one from PARC and one from Smarter Balance. A lot of the things that they're doing are very similar. However, the main difference is that Smarter Balance has an assessment that is computer adaptive, so it changes just like the SATs or GREs to make it easier or harder for a student as they're going along, and PARC does not do that. They just have one single assessment that every student takes. I'm sure that you've been hearing about a lot of the states, or a lot of legislators within states wanting to pull their states back out of the Common Core, and although none of the states have been successful in actually doing that yet, there have been a couple of states that have removed themselves from these assessment consortia. So Utah and Alabama are 2 states that are an example of that, who are still signed on to the Common Core but have chosen not to participate in these 2 assessments. So this is a very rough timeline for the Common Core. This is kind of what the writers of the Common Core were hoping to see, and what you're probably seeing some version of in each one of your states. The most important thing to think about right now is that we're at a point throughout implementation where teachers are getting the grunt and the brunt of the work, and it is their duty now to take these standards that are very hard for most people to understand and to turn them into something in the classroom that kids are going to actually get engaged with and enjoy learning from. And that's why we're doing this presentation today, is that we're hoping that using service learning as one of those strategies is the way to get kids more engaged in the learning process that can look awfully daunting and somewhat boring when you're reading through them just as a list of standards. I'm basically going to stop there. The next 2 slides after this are just talking a little bit about why some states and some legislators within those states are supporting and or not supporting the Common Core. It's just a good thing to think about as you're experienced probably very mixed emotions about the Common Core yourself. If you have any other questions, I'm going to be around for the rest of the webinar, and from here I'm going to turn it back over to Lisa and Molly.
Great. Thanks, Emily. Appreciate it. We'd like you to we're going to throw another question at you, so we're going to keep you busy. I'd like you to think about this. Are you currently using the Common Core state standards in your teaching or curriculum planning? And I ask that understanding that not all of you are practitioners. We understand that. But again, we're just trying to take a pulse on the different populations that are signed on today. So if you could, in the chat room, let us know yes or no whether or not you are actively using the Common Core in your content area right now. So we've got 2 no's, a yes. Facilitating initiative. Good. Math and ELA both. And again, you're going to see if, can you all see the chat room, I'm assuming? I hope so. Anyway, we're going to get all over the board. But I think as we go through and share some information with you, you're going to realize that just what Emily said. I think, I'm going out on a limb here, but I'm going to do it anyway. I think the Common Core designers, the work is wonderful, but the implementation and the execution is a lot more complicated than they had anticipated. And so we've got some pretty important questions to figure out over the next couple of years. So with that, we're going to move forward.
Okay, and this is Molly again, everyone. And I think everyone on this call is committed to service learning. That's why we're all here to advance the field. And we at NCLC wondered how the Common Core state standards were affecting service learning practices that are in full force in schools and districts. We wondered, even if a school has been committed to service learning, in the wake of Common Core, are those practices getting pushed out? Just not because anyone wants them to, but just time and resources are kind of forcing them out. Or, as we've mentioned, our schools and districts and maybe states at the state level seeing service learning as one vehicle through which Common Core instruction can be delivered. So what we did here at NCLC was Lisa and I set about to do a case study to learn how Common Core implementation is affecting service learning, to identify the challenges or anticipated challenges, since we're early in implementation, in blending the 2 complex strategies, and to describe best practices and models that 4 sites around the country are using or plan to use to align these 2 reforms. As I mentioned, we picked 4 sites. They are very different sites. The first is Percy L. Julian High School in Chicago, Illinois. They are an inner-city Chicago school, a large high school, and the student body is 99% African-American. And then we go to Grant Flick Elementary School in Alexandria, Kentucky, which is about the opposite, small rural elementary school, 99% Caucasian. Then North Middle School in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And that, we called it, I think we made this term up, a semi-rural district, a semi-urban middle school, mid-size, and they also have a majority of white students. And lastly, Montpelier Public Schools. Here, this is a small district in Montpelier, Vermont, semi-rural, 90% white, and we ended up looking at the entire district because it's a small district and there's just 1 school per grade section. So, as I mentioned, we found that every site was in different varying levels of Common Core implementation. Julian in Chicago and Grant Flick in Kentucky, in particular, they have begun the process of implementing Common Core and service learning. So, we hope when this case study is published next week is our goal, we're almost finished with it, we hope that these 2 sites can serve as models for some other districts out there that would like to emulate them. But some takeaways, briefly, professional development, of course, we all know how important that is. Each of these reforms, service learning and Common Core, is so complex on its own that training on blending the two is even more important. We did find in places like a Grants Lick Elementary School where service learning has already become part of the culture, they are committed and they're not going to let Common Core detract them from their practice. And of course, we all know that the defunding of Learn and Serve America 2 years ago has affected the sustainability of some schools and district service learning practice. And then, of course, communication and leadership. We found this varied widely throughout the 4 sites. Several sites felt strongly supported by their districts, while they might not feel as strongly supported from their State Department of Education, and in other sites it was the complete opposite, where they felt strong support from the state level. So that was interesting, and as I said, we look to have this case study out next week, so we've got the site for our website, and you can go there to check it out. Okay, now we're going to switch gears just a little bit, and before I jump into civic education, I'd like to just throw a did you know at you. Did you know that more Americans can name a judge on American Idol than can name all 3 branches of government?
Yeah. That's
kind of a sad state of affairs, but that is the case right now. And so again, we're going to talk about civic education before we wrap civic ed, service learning, and Common Core all together at the end. And we would all agree that students should be knowledgeable about the democracy that they live in. But as I just mentioned on a recent national assessment, less than 1/3 of 8th graders taking the test could identify the historical purpose of the Declaration of Independence. And maybe for some of you who are in schools at the ground level, maybe this doesn't surprise you. That doesn't mean that it's not sad. And why should we care about civic education? If Lisa could go back one more, former Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, since she's left the High Court, she has taken on civic ed as her mission, and she reminds us that knowledge of our system of government is not handed down through a gene pool. It must be relearned by each new generation. And since the 1960s, there's been a decline in civic learning. Students today typically take 1 course in civics, as opposed to in the days pre-1960s, 3 courses were required. And as we know, many factors have contributed to this decline, the No Child Left Behind era, and the belief that civics took time away from science and math. But as we know, we're in the Common Core era now, and with the push for 21st century skills and employers calling for more well-rounded, worldly employees, there has been a national movement brewing to reinvigorate the civic mission of schools. And the civic mission of schools, what I mean by that is, other than, of course, students learning, our founding fathers created the institution of public education to produce the next generation of American citizens, to learn, for students to learn what it takes to participate in American democracy. Okay, and the next slide here, luckily, a growing body of research is backing up this point of why we should care about civic education. Not only does it increase student knowledge and engagement, but also expands civic equality. Some groups that may not feel that they have as much access. We all know knowledge is power, so if you know how to be an American citizen, you can expand your civic equality. Again, improve 21st century skills, and there is research showing that it may reduce the dropout rate and improve the school climate overall. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide, and I mentioned this call to reinvigorate the civic mission of schools. Although civic learning was more of a focus in curriculum in the pre-1960s America, that curriculum was primarily focused on textbook-based lectures centered on civic knowledge. And this, of course, you have to have this. This is the foundation of learning, but it did not teach students how to participate in American democracy. The new civics, as it's being called, is more active learning. In addition to civic knowledge, students also need to learn the skills and dispositions necessary to engage in American democracy. It's not enough just to know about how government works, but how can you let your voice be heard if you've never practiced those skills or seen those dispositions? We at NCLC, we just released a document called The Progress of Education Reform, focused on the new civics, and I've listed the site there. This document, if you're interested in more of the research supporting civic learning, this document goes into all the detail on what has changed in the past 25 years and the research supporting civic education. Okay, so let's talk quickly about what those civic competencies are. We know, if we go to the next slide, thanks, Lisa. We know what civic knowledge is, but civic skills, that would be the ability necessary to be active and responsible as an American citizen. Public speaking skills, all the presentation skills, the same thing, the kind of skills that are inherent in the Common Core. And also civic dispositions, this would be the characteristics and outlooks supportive of, again, responsible political engagement. Now, just to show some examples of these, civic content would be, again, a more textbook-based instruction, learning about how our government was set up and our various social movements and struggles. Civic skills, again, a lot of these are the deeper learning skills, intellectual skills, critical thinking, participatory skills, consensus building, and going to dispositions, tolerance and respect for others, having the self-efficacy to know that you can make a difference in the political process, and a concern for your fellow American citizens. Okay, so that's talking about why we should care about civic education. Now, what does it look like in practice? What does effective civic education look like in practice? Some of you may be familiar with a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to civic learning called the Campaign for the Civic Mission of Schools. They are based in D.C., but they work nationwide, and they have produced a seminal document entitled The Guardian of Democracy, came out a couple years ago, and this document details 6 proven practices that have been shown to produce effective civic learning in students, and you all might not be surprised, service learning is one, if you could go forward, Lisa, thanks. Service learning is one of those 6 proven practices. In addition to service learning, we have classroom instruction, which we've talked about, discussion of current events and controversial issues. I know discussing controversial issues can be hard to do in the classroom, but the Guardian does offer some suggestions on how to successfully set ground rules to have those types of hot-button discussions. Extracurricular activities. And of course, we're not talking necessarily about sports here. We're talking about activities that reiterate what students are learning in the classroom. School governance, above and beyond your student council, and simulations of democratic processes And by this I mean student legislatures and mock trials are two examples. And again, we at NCLC and the Guardian of Democracy list examples of all of these in practice if you are interested. So that is a little background on civic learning, and now let's jump back into service learning, focusing on how service learning and civic ed can tie into Common Core.
Thanks, Molly. So this is Lisa again, and so the third practice, we like one of our favorites because obviously it highlights the work that we do, and that practice states, design and implement programs that provide students with the opportunity to apply what they learn through performing community service, and I know that's a dangerous term, but hear me out, community service that is linked to the formal curriculum and classroom instruction. So that right there is the definition of service learning. So we're excited that that's a huge connecting point to service learning and civics, and we're going to show you over the next few minutes how service learning, civics, and Common Core fit together. That's one of our main goals. So you guys are probably mostly familiar with the high-quality service learning elements. We're not going to go into these. Meaningful service, duration and intensity. Duration and intensity is one of the most important, making sure you have enough time and to go deep and to drill down and to get to the deeper learning. Monitoring progress, intentional link to curriculum, and these obviously are from the National Youth Leadership Council, and they came about in 2008. Youth voice, really important. Partnership, can't be stressed enough. Reflection and diversity. Diversity in the sense that students are given the opportunity to see situations and scenarios and the world through the eyes, through a different lens and have different perspectives. So we're going to throw another did you know in here. Students who receive effective civic learning are, did you know, more confident in their ability to speak publicly and communicate with their elected representatives. These are just little nuggets that we thought we'd sprinkle in where appropriate. So these come at no charge, by the way. So we're going to talk a little bit about how these three things work together. I'm going to actually go through, we're going to go through a couple of practical examples. And I know this is kind of a lot of words on here, but I couldn't figure out a way to do this any other way. So if you could just humor me, we're going to talk about how you could take an actual standard, build a service learning project to address that standard, and then what kinds of civic competencies might result. So we're looking at a 7th grade math standard. I brought these right out of the document, and one of the standards says, solve real-life and mathematical problems involving angle, measure, area, surface area, and volume. So thought a little bit about that, and how could we build a service learning project to address those specific things. So one idea would be students could design and help to build a wheelchair accessible ramp where none was in existence. So that probably, comes about as a need that is expressed in the community. Maybe they know someone, maybe they are someone who is wheelchair bound and can't get around to certain buildings or areas. Maybe they have a friend or family member who has that situation. So these are the things they could do. They can talk with individuals who deal with that every day about the challenges they face in navigating the landscape around there. They can then take those stories and share them with community planners, school boards, business owners, any number of organizations or groups of people. They could conduct intense research about what it would cost to design and build a ramp for those individuals, to include a building plan, a timeline. Those are all very collaborative in nature. They could then present their plan to the city council, the mayor, school board, etc. They could then be part of actually putting the wheelchair ramp together, which is actually just rolling up their sleeves and being part of it. And then, of course, celebration is so key. They could celebrate with the community, celebrate with the individuals that will benefit the most. They could create videos. They could make a brochure, any number of things. So the competencies that could bubble up from doing this is the point we're trying to make. So we've got a standard service learning project and civic competencies that could naturally come out of this. a desire for community involvement, a concern for rights and welfare of others, tolerance and respect, personal efficacy, as Molly mentioned earlier, a sense of belonging to a group. Those are all very huge, and those can be pivotal for students and learning how they can actually impact their environment in positive ways. So that's one example. Let's look at another example, a little different grade level. So let's look at 11th to 12th grade. This is in the ELA standards. So we're looking at speaking, listening, comprehension, and collaboration. So here's the standard. It's kind of long. Respond thoughtfully to diverse perspectives. So looking at it through a different lens. Synthesize their comments, claims, and evidence. So in other words, learning to present information from from different places. Resolve contradictions when it's appropriate. Determine what else they need to do to deepen the investigation or to complete the task at hand. So what kind of a project could we do that would, or create, that could address those things? Well, one would be, possibly, they could investigate hydraulic fracturing, or called, as you know, as you are probably more familiar, fracking, and its impacts on the environment. Very hot topic right now in a lot of areas around the country, rightfully so. So what could they do? They could research what is fracking, what isn't fracking. There's a lot of conflict right now about what it is and what it isn't. So really find out what it's about. Find information from local residents. Talk to the people at the oil and gas companies. That's a huge opportunity for growth. Talk to landowners, survey and poll, or interview people who live in that area. They could host, as one school here in Colorado did, they could host and facilitate public conversations about the issue. Up in Fort Collins, there was a school that did such a thing. They planned this big forum, and they held it like a coffee. And they had some really provocative conversations, and the kids were engaged, and they were talking to the mayor, talking to the county commissioner, and it was really empowering for them. Then they could take what they find, and they could present it again to any number of groups, EPA, the city council, Kiwanis, whoever wants to listen. They could create PowerPoints, they could do video, they could skit. A lot of elementary age kids like to do skits, but they're actually pretty spot on when they do that. So what kind of civic competencies come from this kind of a project? Again, as Molly mentioned earlier, this would tease out critical thinking. And these are just some of them. Perspective taking, interpreting things, in other words, like funneling what's really happening and then explaining it in appropriate ways. They are learning to organize, manage, participate with other people, some they don't even know. Engaging in dialogue with people who have different opinions, that's a huge skill. A lot of adults haven't mastered that one yet. Appreciation of difference. So those are some practical examples of how you can take a standard, build a service learning project, and then what could possibly bubble up as a result. And I know I just did a data dump on you, but I hope that you can see the connection there. There's a question that came up, are there suggestions for finding funding for projects for low-income schools? What we're going to do is we're going to, hopefully we can have access to these questions, and we would like to try to get back to you in some way about that. That's a great question. And in the resource section at the end of this, there was no way we could list all the available resources. But if you've done any digging on the internet, I think you'll agree that Common Core there's more and more every single day about Common Core, about how to use it practically in the classroom. Just like when service learning was brand new, there was nothing, and then as time went on, service learning was everywhere. So we're kind of helping to monitor what comes up, but we will definitely keep our eyes out about that. I hope that's helpful. We'd like to ask you another question, in case we haven't anesthetized you too much. What would help you to effectively implement the Common Core in your classroom, for those of you who are practitioners? Is there anything that comes to mind right now that would be specifically helpful? These are the kinds of things that we would like to know. I'm sure there are other organizations that would love to know, how can we support teachers in the trenches, curriculum coordinators in the trenches. This is one of our goals, and we take this information, and then what we try to do is share with policymakers, these are the needs, these are the realities, how can you all make better policy and address those needs? So I'm seeing content-specific professional development. That's a good idea. I don't know if any of you have had that yet. We can talk about that a little bit later too as well. But these are just, you can keep the questions coming. We're going to move forward here. So what have we learned? So far, hopefully what you've learned is that service learning's curricular connections is what make it an ideal strategy. It's not the only strategy, as Molly said. It's one. It's a proven way, though, that we've found that it improves academic achievement, it decreases dropout rate, so it's a win-win for everyone. So that's what makes it such a natural fit with the Common Core. So when you take the standards, you include quality service learning practice or projects around that, the civic competencies are a natural result. And as Molly said, we've got some additional case study coming soon, next week sometime, and we will let everybody know. That'll launch, it'll go on our website, and it'll launch nationally. So we've got some time for some additional questions. And what we'd like you to think about right now is we'd really like to get some specific questions from you about, if you have any, about service learning implementation, if you have any questions about Common Core implementation, how to get started, if you have questions about effectively linking the two together, those are the things that we would like to know. So we have one question here. It says, a large part of service-based learning is the students determining a need and then problem solving around it. Yet by using standards to steer their projects, it eliminates that step. Do you recommend building projects around standards or finding standards that fit projects? I think you can do either one. I used to be a teacher, but in our workshops we tell practitioners, you know, you can do it either way. You can start with a standard, and then you can use that to launch and open up the possibilities for what kinds of activities are going to elicit that learning, or you can have a service learning project and back into it. So take a service learning project. Yes.
I will just note the Chicago school, Julian High School, they are doing the latter. They're taking their project that they've been doing for a couple of years now with an entire grade and back mapping it to fit certain standards.
Thank you. I forgot about that. So that's another neat thing. In the paper that Molly and I were working on, that'd be a good read for you because it actually goes into some depth about how they're addressing this, whether they're starting with service learning and backing in, or whether they're starting with the standard and moving forward. So I encourage you all to take a good read on that. Another question is, where is the student voice? How do we help administrators in the State Department of Ed understand how crucial student voice is? That's a recurring question. It is, and it's funny, we all talk about youth voice, but even we catch ourselves sometimes probably not utilizing it as often as we should. So it's something, it has to be intentional. It's one of the standards, and I would imagine that as these examples and practical things bubble up when people are using them, the resources start to come to light. I would bet you that youth voice is addressed, but that's something we need to keep on. We need to stay on and keep reminding one another that's probably one of the most important things in service learning and Common Core is to let the kids drive their learning. So it's a skill. It's risky, but I think the practitioners that I've spoken with that have been able to do that say that the benefits are far outweigh the risk. So that's a great question. Okay, yeah, Molly just pointed out to me that since we don't really work with content specifically, we can serve as a link. We can provide links with organizations who do that sort of thing, and we'd be happy to do that. I'm going to be in touch with Lana, probably permanently. Lana, much to your dismay. But anyway, I think that we would be happy to try to find organizations that could really shed some important light on that for you. Are there any questions that we haven't asked you or that you want to ask that we haven't addressed? Because we've got a few minutes that we can certainly, to dig in a little deeper. So if something comes up and you think of something, feel free to email us, and I'm going to, our slide at the end will have our contact information. But again, some of the resources that you have, that hopefully you have access to through this webinar, the 8 standards for quality practice, you guys should, those are probably your Bible. Common Core State Standards is a pretty complex document, I will say. And this little link at the bottom will take you right to the Common Core Initiative site. That's a wonderful site. If you haven't already, I would urge you to go and familiarize yourself with that. It does a really nice job of laying it out pretty simply, and you can see how your state is stacking up against the others. And then again, the new Civics, the Progress of Ed reform that Molly referenced, that's another great piece that she and our Director Paul put together. So hopefully those will be helpful to you. And then this is our contact information. Again, we're located here in Denver, but we're always open to try to help you move forward in your work. That's one of our goals, and we're trying to go to bat for you when we talk to policymakers. We want to know from you, what are your issues, what are your challenges, and we're trying to be the conduit for you with policymakers. So if you get nothing else from today, know that you've got allies, and that we're constantly trying to make things better for you out there in the field. Do you have any other questions? There's a question here that asks if we're looking at the C3 College Career and Civic Life Framework for Social Studies Standards and Service.
Yeah, this is Molly, and yes, the director of our center, Paul Bauman, he is working on that, the 3 C's. I know specifically he's working on a presentation that he'll give this summer at our conference, trying to get that 3rd C a little bit more play with the other 2. And Duncan has mentioned it several times, so we're hopeful that the 3rd C will become a player.
So Linda, we'll keep you in the loop on that. How's that? We're hopeful. That's always good to be rubbing elbows with the heavyweights, I guess you might say. Any other questions? Lana, do you have any questions of us?
I don't have any questions, but I do just want to remind everybody on the webinar that obviously contact Lisa or Molly if you have any additional questions. We're going to create a topic on the Generator School Network where we will host the recording of this webinar, the documents that we sent through. We'll maybe start a discussion with some of the questions that were brought up today. So if you do see an answer that you could help any of the webinar participants today, maybe you're scrolling through and you see a grant for a low-income school and you want to send it through, just seeing this as a community of practice and how we're all kind of working through this together. And so after the webinar, within the next week, we'll send a link to that place on the Generator School Network, our free online community, and you'll be able to access this or share it with any of your colleagues or peers.
Well, thank you, Lana. We appreciate the opportunity to help out with this today.
Yeah, thank you, and to many more webinars to come.
Oh, yeah. Hey.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.